So, hello, MomoCon. Hi. Are you excited about being here to meet the people behind Gargoyles? That's good, but I think you can do better. Try again. Come on, come on. Much better. Okay, so I am going to introduce our guests today. We have, first of all, he is the man behind Young Justice. He's worked on Kim Possible, The Spectacular Spider-Man. He is a writer, co-creator, and producer, Mr. Greg Wiseman of Gargoyles. Our second guest is a voice actor extraordinaire. He has worked on numerous video games, too many to even list. He has worked for numerous documentaries, award-winning, some of them. And he is the man behind our favorite beast, Goliath, Mr. Keith David.
Hi.
Okay,
So,
Greetings.
is this the mic for questions? I can't see as usual.
It looks like it.
All right, so if you guys have questions, you can start lining up here. We'll get started just to get the ball rolling, but come line up.
form a nice cue line. All right, so one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a few questions and then you guys can come up. I want to remind everyone that I'm sure you all have amazing questions, but we can only leave it to one because there's so many of you. So please think of one question, all right? I'm going to start it off with this. So a kind of heavy topic. Animation is viewed by many currently as simply kid stuff. Do you think the status quo will be changing anytime soon?
I think the status quo has already changed and shifted. For me, beginning with Gargoyles, because it's the first time that I could make the distinction between a cartoon and an animated series. Now we have many animated series that are not cartoonish. You know, I mean, at least the association with cartoons, especially from my perspective, coming from a different, generational gap, cartoons were like silly little interludes before the movie. They were fun, nothing necessarily realistic about it. But caricatures and just mini jokes or something. And an animated series has something more quote unquote serious in nature. I mean it's more than just frivolous fun. And certainly for me, Gargoyles was a magnificent blend of wonderful intellect and creativity and animation, and it was drawn. It was characters that were drawn by artists, and Greg was again magnificent in the storylines and the vast literacy of it all. I mean. Somebody told me last night that because of Gargoyles, they went on to major in medieval studies. And I thought that was magnificent. I don't want to overuse that word, but that's there's no better way to describe for me the experience as being truly magnificent. I mean, it was some of the most fun I had in my life. When I grow up, I want to be like Goliath.
You want to switch?
Let's go to new one.
Okay.
Keep moving.
All right.
We still have no one lined up to ask questions. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the other guy.
Yeah. So we all have mentors. They guide us, help us find our path, and encourage us to be better versions of ourselves. Tell us about your own personal Obi-Wan and how they shaped your career. Let's start with you, Greg.
Boy, I've had a bunch. One was when I started in comic books, it was Dick Giordano, DC Comics, who was this executive editor at DC and was this incredibly warm, nice guy, and also, not incidentally, an incredibly talented artist himself. There were other guys at DC like Andy Helfer and Rich Bruning. My writing partner, Carrie Bates, who had 20 years experience on me, was a great ally and mentor. When I got to Disney, there were four guys probably, Gary Kreisel and Bruce Cranston were executives there who taught me how to, maneuver that whole world of, internal politics and all that sort of thing and still sort of maintain one's integrity while doing it. And then there was Tad Stones. Tad created Darkwing Duck, Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, and produced those two shows and many others. And Tad really taught me how to develop a show on Darkwing Duck. That's the first show I ever helped develop. I worked with Tad on that show. I mean, Tad developed it. I just was like this junior guy trying to pay attention. But Tad really taught me a lot there. And then Alan Zaslav, who produced shows like DuckTales and many, many others. The Charlie Brown Christmas special, and that kind of thing. And Alan really took me under his wing when I first got to Disney and really taught me the entire animation process from beginning to end. And so he was a very valuable mentor. There were a lot of, and that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. There were a lot of great guys over, been doing this professionally since 1983. Most of them weren't born, probably. And so, I've had a lot of great people helping me out along the way.
One of my greatest mentors just recently passed away. His name was Robert Neff Williams, and he was my voice teacher at school. And for 30 years, I would never do a classic play, especially, without consulting him first, because one of the things that his work taught us how to do was, as an actor, to have your voice express the nuance of your thought. And, what we do as actors is we take what's written on the page and breathe life into it, because you can read it off the page and it doesn't mean anything. You get the words. And if you know the meaning of the words, that might you'll get some interpretation. But sometimes when you're reading, you have to read it 3 times in order to understand it, is because with or without punctuation, you have to see how we don't speak in sentences, we speak in phrases. We write sentences. So the actor has to learn how to take those sentences and make them into phrases that we understand, so that you understand what the intent of the author is in writing that phrase. And Robert Neff was a master at being able to help you interpret that, and that it's something I carry to this day. Another was my speech teacher, Edith Skinner, who wrote the book Speak with Distinction, and she also, emphasized one of the things that resonates most with me, how she would say that, the consonants shape the sentence and the clarity of the sentence, but the vowels carry the emotion of the thought of the word. And she would say, never be afraid to go for the dramatic. Never underestimate the dramatic value of sounds. So, especially in terms of long and short sounds, especially vowel sounds, and how, you can say ooh, which means one thing, or you can say ooh, which means something else, and it carries a different emotional response. And having these kinds of influences has, it's given me a career.
So we're going to go ahead and start with our questions. I want to remind everyone to keep it to one question, and try to speak directly into the mic because sometimes it's hard to hear.
All right, cool.
Good job.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Specifically for Mr. David, I'm a veteran of the United States Army, and I know you were enlisted, and that show meant a lot. I thought it was a great show, and it showed that the military is not all violence and war, and it meant a great deal to me, and I wish the show was still going. I just wanted to thank you for being in it.
I appreciate that, because I appreciate you and your service, and that was the one great thing about that show is that there are a lot of people who serve in the military, and not everybody carries a weapon or uses a weapon, and at the bottom line is it's a business, and the business has to be run by many people, and there's a relatively small portion of people who actually go to battle. The rest of the people stay at home and take care of those people. And that job is as important as anyone else, and especially on enlisted, the work that we do, we take care of the people who are the families and friends of the people who are deployed, so that they have nothing to do but worry about what their job is. That keeps us as a people safe, so they can concentrate on their work. And it's I thought it was. The premise of the show was, I thought it was great,
Thank you very much for making it.
Thank you.
All right, so a little nervous, I'll admit, but again, I grew up watching Gargoyles. It's one of my biggest inspirations. So, Mr. David, I have a question for you. As far as making a career change from my current career into acting, would you have any advice for me? Exactly, because whether it's voice acting or regular acting, because I'm at a point in time where my time in the military is almost over, and acting's been an interest of mine since I was a kid, especially since watching Gargoyles.
Well, I would distinct an interest and a burning desire, first of all.
Yeah.
Having a mild interest, then you can go, community group, your church group, and do church plays. But if you want to act as a professional,
Yes.
then you have to study as a professional, and you have to find an acting class and teachers who will respond to the need that you feel that you have as an actor. I don't feel you can't make an actor. Actors are not made. It's like I said, it's a burning desire that's the way you need to express yourself. So you train to express that, to be in order to do that. You wouldn't ask somebody walk up to you and said, "Hey man, I'm into cars, and I'm really into taking things apart and building. Can I work on your car?" Would you let that man work on your car?
Probably not.
Probably not. Only in this profession that somebody says, "Hey man, I can tell a joke. I got personality. I can act." Well, yeah, you can. That can make an ACTER, but not an ACTOR.
Yeah.
And there's a big distinction there. So if you really want to do it, I suggest that you study and just keep doing it.
All right. Good to go. Thank you. Hello.
You're on.
All right, sorry.
Just get a little closer to the mic.
Sorry about that.
every so often, like occasionally concept art will come out or like rumors will come out that they're either continuing Gargoyles or doing it in a live action format. If something like that actually were to happen, would you be involved again?
Hopefully.
God knows I'd hope so. All of us would be involved, and really, from my point of view, there's no reason why we shouldn't. If they made a live-action movie, it's not like Keith would have to do the stunts, you know. I mean, it would be CGI. So what you're talking about is motion capture and voice, and Keith does that, you know. So I mean, there's no one else who can play Goliath from my point of view. And there's no need for anyone else to play Goliath from my point of view. Though I'm clearly biased, there's no one else who should be in charge of Gargoyles except me.
Absolutely.
In terms of rumors and stuff, look, I'm always honest with the fans. I'm not always cheerful, but I'm always honest. And if you follow me on Twitter, for example, believe me, if anything were going on, I'd tell you. So, you know, if you hear a rumor and you haven't heard it from me, it's not happening. That's all it is. It's a rumor. There's a lot of wishful thinking. There are a lot of people who, and I've seen this happen a lot. I talked about this at one of the other panels, but, you know, someone will post something like, wouldn't it be great if there were a Gargoyle movie in some chat room? And by the bottom of the page, someone's going, there's going to be a Gargoyles movie? You know,
Right.
Just like a game of telephone, suddenly this thing that was just someone wistfully saying, wouldn't that be terrific, becomes this rumor. Also, if you see an article saying something like that's going to happen and the date of the article is April 1st, you might want to take it with a grain of salt. The problem with the internet is that, you know, these articles keep, literally, April Fool's Day jokes keep popping up in December or, you know, the following February or something like that, and no one bothers to look at the date anymore. They just see the article for them for the first time. This article's out in February, and suddenly they're like, oh my God, this is happening, and then they'll write me, and I'm like, look at the date on the article. I will tell you, I'm not going to hide it from you. Right now, I'm talking with people about trying to get a live-action movie going. I'd love to be able to say, and I've succeeded, but I haven't. The talks are ongoing, but there's not even any real progress made, but I haven't given up. I'm also talking to people about doing more Gargoyles comic books. We did 18 issues for SLG that turned out sort of as our official third season and turned out pretty well. And we'd love to do more. Again, I'd love to be able to say, and it's happening, but it's not. But the talks are ongoing, so maybe someday soon I'll be able to give you guys better news. And when it comes from me, you can guarantee that it's a true thing and not, frankly, some baloney that just happens to be on the internet.
The other thing and people have and do, but what I would suggest, from my understanding, and Greg, you can correct me if I'm wrong, one letter to the network, to Disney, is worth 10,000 votes. For every letter that comes in, it is representative of like 10,000 people who feel the same way, who are not writing. So I would encourage you to write them and to say, we want more Gargoyles. We want Greg and Keith involved. We want to see that. And encourage your friends, because, as you already know, there are many series that have been canceled and resurrected because their fans on the internet have insisted that they come back to life. So, therein lies a grand possibility.
Thank you.
Next.
Don't hurt yourself.
Let me make that a little less difficult. Firstly, Mr. Mrs. Weissman and David, thank you once again for coming on behalf of all of us awestruck fans.
Yes.
First, I have a reaction to something you said to the previous individual. 18 issues. I only was able to find up to 8. So,
We did 3 trade paperbacks. They're very expensive now because they're out of print.
Yes.
One was called Clan Building Volume 1. It collected 6 issues. One was called Clan Building Volume 2. It collected 6 issues, including a handful, probably 4 or so, that didn't come out as individual issues, but they came out with a trade. And the third is called Gargoyles Bad Guys, which collected another 6 issues. So it was
okay.
total. But for some of those issues, the last few Bad Guys and the last few Gargoyles, you have to get the trades to see them. One of the other things I'm trying to do is to get, in some form or another, those trades back into print. Right now, on Amazon, someone told me, I don't know if this is true, but someone told me on Amazon that one of the trades was selling for $2,500.
Oh, good heavens.
It seems nuts to me. I mean, I'm proud of those issues, but that's just nuts.
Yes. Then this may render my planned question moot. I'd hope to ask, were you able to continue the Gargoyle storyline? What was the ultimate goal of the Illuminati concerning their machinations
I'm
with...
not giving out any spoilers.
Oh,
The reason I'm not giving out spoilers is twofold. One, because I want to do more of these stories, so I'm not going to as it is, I feel like over the last 20 years I've given away so many spoilers that already I'm annoyed with myself. But I'm certainly not going to give it any more because I plan on doing more. I haven't given up hope. I still want to do more, so I'm not going to tell you because then it makes my writing job a lot harder to surprise you. And the second reason is that ideas minus their execution are subject to a ton of second guessing, particularly on that interwebs thing. I start just saying ideas and people are like, well, I don't know if that's going to work, and I'm like, look, trust me, and they're like, well, I don't trust you, and I'd rather just do it, and in the execution, the idea, I think, will work pretty well, but sometimes the idea itself alone, you can't tell whether it'll work. But no spoilers. So all you people who are waiting for spoilers in line, you can just sit down right now.
could we at least have the name of Derek and Maggie's baby?
No.
Would they? Aww.
Just said no spoilers. None. Move on.
Hi.
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 I do have kind of a serious question, but not really. As an artist, I know you have to do research and stuff on, especially with mythological creatures. And since the gargoyles, they seem reptilian, and I was wondering, they're not?
No.
Okay, because I was wondering why it was that the females needed breasts. When they're babies, they don't really need milk.
They're not mammals, they're not reptiles, they're gargoyles.
Okay.
So they're a whole separate species, a whole separate genus. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know but we decided long ago, at a Gargoyles convention actually, that they are gargoyles. So Bronx is a gargoyle beast, and Goliath, Demona, Angela, etc. They're all gargoyles.
Okay.
And both of those fall under the category of gargoyles, and so you can't think of them in reptilian terms or amphibian terms or even mammalian terms. You have to think of them as their own separate species.
Okay, I thought it was just maybe a stylistic choice.
No, I mean, you've seen gargoyles who look vaguely lion-esque. You've seen gargoyles who look more reptilian, like Zafiro, for example. And you've seen, you've seen all sorts of gargoyles. So there are a lot of artistic choices going on in there, obviously. But if you're thinking in terms of within the universe of the show, you have to think of them as being a different species whatsoever.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Hi.
Um,
Could you move
Come a little closer.
sorry about that. Is it on? Yeah, there we
Yes.
go. Growing up and watching a lot of like Disney and other cartoon shows, I'd always noticed a lot of like darker undertones and stuff. But the first really fully dark written series I'd seen was Gargoyles. Loved it to death. But keeping that in mind, I have to ask, where did Jalapeno come from?
Gargoyles is. I had a whole rant about this on was it Friday night? Gargoyles is not a dark series.
He ranted
Right.
on this for like an hour.
Like an hour. I'm not going to repeat that.
And well, I mean, and again, right? Again, I mean, you know, let me try to make a distinction between, you know, this perception of being dark and the reality, because usually, and you know, when you look at animated series or, you know, cartoons, especially cartoons, as being silly and frivolous and fun and laughing and joking, you know, Gargoyles had something else. It had more. It was more than that. There were stories that you could really sink your teeth into, and that you had to think about. Most cartoons, you don't have to have a thought in your head to enjoy and to continue watching. With Gargoyles, you have to think. It gives you something to think about. Now, you may consider that dark, but I just think that's just life.
True, but
So let me just say that. But as far as jalapeno is concerned, actually jalapeno originated in Atlanta. I was here doing a job at the Alliance Theater, and there is a wonderful actress singer here. Her name is Bernadine Mitchell. If you're a jazz fan, you might know her. She was singing at a club here, playing with a guy named Mose Davis, who's a brilliant pianist. And when she began her evening, she said, "Now, I know y'all came to hear me sing, but I'm not going to sing for you. I'm going to sing for you. And since we're not in church, if the Spirit moves you, I don't want you to say hallelujah, but say jalapeno." And I never laughed so hard in my life. I was so moved by her use of the word jalapeno. Somebody say jalapeno. Jalapeno. So I then adopted it for my own and began to use the word myself. And whenever I'd have a moment when I was feeling particularly jovilant or, you know, exuberant or explicative, instead of cussing, I'd say jalapeno. And I'd say jalapeno in joy. You know, it's one of those kinds of expressions.
You had a joyful.
And it was always a joyful session, especially on the few occasions where we all got to meet together, or more than two of us were in the booth at a time. So it was quite well known that at a session you're going to hear Keith say jalapeno somewhere or another. And then I'll let Greg take over from here.
At some point, we're at a session, and you know, not our first. You know, we've been doing this for a while, so we've heard Keith say this many times by that point. And our voice director on the show is an incredibly talented guy named Jamie Thomas. Jamie also voice directed Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice with me, but also a bunch of other shows, a ton of stuff. But Jamie turns to me at one point after Keith said that. He says, "Bet you can't fit jalapeno into the show." I said, "I bet I can." I ran wonderful writer, staff story editor on the show, Gary Sperling, who passed away now it's been a decade probably. One of my best friends, a great guy. Was story editing on Gargoyles, and he turned in a script called Protection. And I always do a final pass on these scripts before we send them out. So I did my final passes, and I put in all that jalapeno stuff that you see in that thing where Dracon's offering jalapeno peppers to Elisa, and she takes one, and then she offers on Broadway, and at the very end of the episode, Broadway offers one to Goliath. And so Gary reads my draft of his script, and he's like, so, I'm just checking to see if you've gone nuts. And I'm like, well, yes, but it's to win a bet. And he's like, oh, okay. And so we did this, and at the end, and my partner on the show is Frank Parr, and at the end of the episode, Goliath bites down on a pepper and shouts jalapeno. And when we got to the mix session for that episode, which is months later, Frank was not a fan of the whole jalapeno thing being in the show. I think he came around to it later, but initially he thought it was too much like the Ninja Turtles shouting cowabunga, kind of. But when we got to mixing that show, he's like, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it. So he put this incredible echo on it, and a shot of the whole city, so that you hear Goliath's jalapenos echoing all over. So then, what had followed there is, we did that in that episode, and then JB turns to me and says, well, yeah, but I bet you can't get Hudson to say it. So it went on like that. Sort of like, okay, first he's going to say it, then Elisa's going to say it, and then I started thinking, this is useful to us because for the same reason that Keith was saying it in the first place, which is that, we can't curse on the show, we can't, do this stuff, but this is something that could be theirs that they use in that place. So what you'll see is, first it's this one bizarre episode where there are all these jalapeno peppers in it, and then one by one you see various characters saying it, and then you see them all start to use it in essence as a curse word, or as a substitute curse word. And then you'll see it drop off rather abruptly. And the reason for that was that Frank finally came to me and said, the artists are in revolt over jalapeno. They think it's too silly, they don't think it fits the tone of the show, you've got to stop doing it. And so we did, because it wasn't worth fighting over. I was sort of shaking my head saying, I think you're wrong about this. And then later, Frank sort of came to me and said, I think it was a good thing. And in my very last episode that I wrote, which was actually for Goliath Chronicles, which otherwise we won't talk about at all, I put jalapeno back in, and this executive, Jay Fukudo, came to me and said, I thought we weren't doing that anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but this is my last one I'm doing. So, and he's like, okay. So you get one more in the journey. But that was sort of the arc of jalapeno. But then when we got back to the comics and I was writing them myself, I put jalapeno back in the way we used to use it, which was as a useful thing that was theirs. Thank you.
Thank you. That question has plagued me for 20 years.
Mr. David, after voicing so many amazing, different, various characters, which one, other than Goliath, did you have the most fun with?
It's hard to answer because when you're behind the mic, I'm working, and I love to work. So, so it's the most fun that I have is I would usually say like the last thing I've done, but I got to say that my two absolute favorite series that I've done was Gargoyles and Spawn, because to me, I mean, they were so. I mean, if I had a coin, it would be Goliath on one side and Spawn on the other, because to me, Spawn was like Darth Vader trying to work his way back to the Force. You know, I mean, in some way, although he was a very now that was a dark character, but in I'm going to say this for the first time. In light of his darkness, there was something. I mean, and another reason why I liked it because whereas like Goliath, like I said, I want to be like him when I grow up because he's a being, a creature that stands and exemplifies some of the greatest human values that we can aspire to. Spawn, in his desire to survive, selling his soul to the devil, inherently was a very good man. And that inherent goodness never went totally away from him. So it was always there as a nugget that wouldn't go away, and so it would always return somehow. And I just love that about the both of them.
Thank you for being here so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello. This is a question for both of you, actually. Could you explain some of the sort of like your history, like before the show, before Gargoyles, the TV show started, and like how that came to be, and your experiences with that?
You mean
Like how?
background, or how Gargoyles was developed and came to be?
Yes, how it was developed, came to be, how you learned that it was going to be aired, that kind of stuff.
I was director of series development at Walt Disney Television Animation. I developed shows, as I mentioned earlier, I worked on Darkwing Duck, and I developed Goof Troop, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Bonkers, Schnucks and Meat, funny cartoon show, Raw Tunage, I mean, like, I don't know. And those are the ones that actually got on the air. I mean, I probably developed 100+ series while I was there. We used to say, I was talking about this Friday night too, we used to say that for every one series we sold and got on the air, we had to develop about 10. One of the shows I developed was a show called Gargoyles, which was a show that was inspired by Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears. So it was a show about these cute little multicolored gargoyles. It was a comedy adventure show. These gargoyles had a spell cast on them in the medieval times, and they woke up in the modern era, and they had all these funny adventures. And they had a human friend who tried to look out for them, but they were precocious and goofy and all sorts of fun things. And it was this great comedy show that we really liked, and we pitched that to Michael Eisner, who at the time ran the Walt Disney Company, and was really, in some ways, the last of the moguls. In those days, Michael decided everything. Big things, small things. It went in front of Michael and he made the final decision. That doesn't work that way anymore. Now things are decided by committee. It's actually much more difficult. And Michael didn't like it in the past. But I thought, and my bosses thought, that there was still my immediate bosses still thought there was something in this idea. And so I showed the pitch, this comedy pitch, to Tad Stone, who I mentioned before, worked on Darkwing and Rescue Rangers and Aladdin and other shows. And Tad had this one great suggestion. You've got all these funny little gargoyles. He's like, what if you had one big gargoyle? And my background is I've been doing these funny cartoons for 3 or 4 years, but my background was DC Comics. I've written superheroes for a long time. And suddenly that clicked for me. And Goliath was sort of born, not visually because I can't draw worth a damn, but conceptually, Goliath sort of sprung from my head like Athena right then. And then a guy named Greg Guler designed him, and we took the character of Goliath and we put the whole rest of the show through it. So we had a villain who was sort of a Captain Hookish figure named Xavier, and he became Xanatos. Xavier had an assistant who in the first episode of the comedy show got turned into an anthropomorphic aardvark. His name was Mr. Owen. He became Owen Burnett. We had a gargoyle who liked to sit home and watch TV on the couch. His name was Ralph. He became Hudson. All those characters in the show existed in this sort of goofy comedy development. They all became the characters that you've seen on the show through Goliath. So we then created, we loved this idea, we created this huge pitch with the mutates and the pack and all this stuff in it. We pitched that to Michael Eisner. And he didn't like it, it passed. And still, my bosses felt, I was feeling like, okay, it's dead. I actually thought we were done, but my bosses felt there was still something in it. So they sent us to the drawing board again, and so we sat down, my team and I sat down, and we said, okay, what do we want to change about the show? And we decided nothing. We weren't going to change anything about the show. The problem wasn't the show, the problem was the pitch. The problem was that we had put everything in the kitchen sink into the pitch. So instead, we focused the pitch, and you can see the final pitch. If you get the first season Gargoyles DVD, one of the extras is me pitching the show. And you can see that pitch. And the show is very focused on the relationship between Goliath and Elisa. It is that Beauty and the Beast idea. We mentioned Xanatos briefly, we mentioned Demona briefly, we mentioned the other gargoyles very briefly, but we focused that whole pitch on Goliath and Elisa. It's about those two. And, you know, when we made, and then, so we pitched it to him again, and he said, yes. And it was a shorter pitch. You know, there was nothing new in it. It was just less. One of the lessons I've learned is that less is more when you're pitching. So, you know, that worked out really well. So then when we made the show, we put the pack back into it. We put the mutates back. All those great ideas were still great ideas. They were just distracting in the pitch itself. Then in terms of, you know, I'll let Keith talk about his experience getting the role, but what I will say is that, just because it's mildly amusing, probably not very amusing, but we had a lot of trouble finding our Goliath, a lot of trouble. We must have listened to easily hundreds, you know, 200 or 300 actors trying to find Goliath. Keith was not one of the first people who auditioned for us. And then Jamie Thomason, who I mentioned before, calls me up and says, I think we found it. I think we've got it. I'm like, great, who is it? He says, Keith David. And I got confused because there's another actor named David Keith. Who is, by the way, a good actor, but not, you know, with his sort of Tennessee twang, not exactly who you picture for Goliath. And I'm like, really, you sure? And it became clear relatively quickly that Jamie and I were talking at cross purposes. And he's like, no, you're thinking of David Keith. I'm talking about Keith David. And I said, and I didn't know Keith then. And I said, well, what would I know Keith from? He said, and he goes, well, and the first thing he says is, they live. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is this the guy who had that fist fight with Roddy Piper? And I'm like, yeah, get that guy. But I don't know what your experience is.
Well, my manager had been talking to Jamie for about a year about, you know, just trying to get me into something animated, you know, to be a voice actor. And nothing came up that was suitable, I guess. So when this came along, my background is classical theater, and I've done a lot of Shakespeare, and I think Shakespeare's a great influence on Greg because the writing was just right in my wheelhouse. So I mean, I fell when I saw the first copy, I was like, oh my God, I love this shit. I just love this shit. But they wanted a Scottish accent, and so and the prototype was archetype was Sean Connery. So of course I came in doing my best Sean Connery. And then finally Jamie said, no, forget the Sean Connery thing. Just say it. And I got a job. So that was, I mean, it was one of, Gargoyles, I have 3 jobs in my life that I was sort of hired on the spot, or at least that's what it seemed like, I mean, I walked into the audition for Platoon, and after I finished, Oliver Stone sent me home. He said, I want you to come back tomorrow, but I want you to read this other part. And I said, okay. He said, it's a better part anyway. So I came back in the next day and he said, as far as I'm concerned, the part is yours. He says, it's really great to see somebody who, looks like what I wrote. And it's Hollywood, man. So I think he's just lying, This is going to be, this is crap. So stupid on my part was my agent. I had just gotten a new agent, and he said, I've met Oliver Stone. Tell him I said hello. But he was a new agent, and sometimes my memory for names just goes vercocked. And so I said, as I was leaving the room, I said, oh, by the way, my agent says hello to you. He said, what's his name? I said, I don't remember. Yeah, sure, right. He said, if tell him to give me a good deal on you. Then I just knew I blew the job. And an hour later I called. He said blah, blah, blah. But an hour later he called and I was offered the job. Another time was I walked into, again, the language of this part. One of the greatest parts I've ever had in life in the theater was I played the chimney man in Jelly's Last Jam. And again, it was written by George Wolfe, and the writing was in this wonderful poetic Shakespearean kind of vein, which again is, so I walked into the audition and read the copy, and I didn't leave the room when he said, okay, the part's yours. And I'm like, oh shit. Really? And so when Gargoyles came along, and it was a similar kind of experience, Jamie was very excited and says, I want you for the job. And I'm like, really? Because, that just doesn't happen. I mean, like I said, in Hollywood, people don't keep their word a lot. But this is one of the great experiences of my life when somebody kept their word.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, gentlemen. First off, I just want to say that this show was part of my childhood growing up with that animation block on the WB. I was raised on this show, and I'm absolutely flattered that I'm even standing before you asking this question. You guys are really big heroes in my book. Speaking with limited experience with developing shows and stuff like that, I often get succumbed to something known as developmental hell with any kind of things that I make and stuff like that. Was there anything related with the animated TV show or the comic books or anything along those lines that was delayed for so long, or just you couldn't find the right thing? You just were in this developmental hell state with the show?
With Gargoyles?
Yeah.
Specifically?
Yes.
Well, like I said, it took us 2 years to sell the show. I don't think of that as development hell because we really were advancing at each point. And again, in those days, because it was Michael Eisner, when he finally said do it, we just did it because Michael Eisner had said do it. So everyone at Disney either got on board or got out of the way. So I don't think I've been in development hell a lot. But I don't think of Gargoyles as one of those things. But still, even that show took 2 years to sell.
The other thing I would say is that which you describe as developmental hell, the way I'm hearing it right this second, sounds to me like a misperception. You see, in these days, with the internet and McDonald's, everybody thinks that, the idea that you have today should be developed and put on air tomorrow. Nothing Nothing happens that fast. And if it does, and when it does, it is truly the exception and not the rule. So, I'm just reminded of a commercial that I recently saw about talking to Thomas Edison about developing the light bulb, the filament in the light bulb, which took 1,000 tries, and one of his assistants describing it as we had 1,000 failures, and he said it wasn't 1,000 failures, it was 1,000 tries before we got it right. So,
Yeah, that's actually some really good insight. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, guys.
All right, so we've got only about 5 minutes left, and I'm seeing like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we got to go really fast. So lightning round. I'm going to take it for granted that you're happy to have us here and all that sort of stuff. Just get right to your questions so we can get through them fast.
Okay, Mr. David, I know some people probably told you could do a great Darth Vader voice.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was wondering, have you ever had the opportunity to do anything Star Wars related? Like any?
Not thus far. Why, I don't know, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. Perhaps someday that will happen. Again, if you think that should be so, write to the powers that be and say, hey, why don't you invite Keith David to the Star Wars,
Okay.
party?
All right, that's good.
Hi. Like everyone else, I grew up with Gargoyles. I actually really like Puck. Would you be interested in doing a show about Puck's story?
An entire show about Puck?
Yes.
No. I'll tell you why, because Puck's plans are so complicated. Those were probably the hardest episodes. The Trickster episodes in general were the hardest ones to write because you want to keep the trick going. You want to fool the audience and this kind of thing. I think Puck is wonderful, by the way. I love Brent Spiner's portrayal of him. I love the character. I want to use him all the time. I love the character of Owen, and I love the contrast between Owen and Puck. But an entire show that Puck was the star of would probably kill me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a person who watching Gargoyles was a means of getting out of a very dark, dark place in my life. And to this day, your voice and every time I hear you, it brings me comfort and makes me feel better. And as a creator and as an actor doing Gargoyles, did you ever really get to see the impact that you had on kids, or was that something that came later?
You can't have the chicken before the egg. I mean, in that sense, in doing the conventions and stuff, and having people like you tell us the impact that we've had, to me is moving and exciting and why we do it. But, it was a result of having been on and actually a result of having been off and been, running in reruns and stuff that people still are so impacted. And that's a wonderful raison d'être.
Thank you.
Hi, this is a question for Keith David. In your opinion, who would win, Goliath or the Arbiter?
Let's just say it'd be a hell of a fight.
Thank you.
Hi, I enjoyed both your works. I've enjoyed watching Gargoyles. I've also watched Young Justice as well recently. And I noticed that Keith David was playing Mongol on the second season. Was there any chance of him working, if you continued on, would have been more work for Mongol or another role for Keith?
Well, Keith was amazing as Mongol, and yeah, if we had done more, we didn't kill Mongol off. He was still around, so we definitely would have brought him back eventually. Mongol's one of my favorite DC villains, and so I cast one of my favorite guys to play him. So we would have been back, yeah.
Thank you.
just remembered earlier that you said you'd be up for other Gargoyles projects if the opportunity came about, and I was just thinking, how would y'all feel about getting Gargoyles in video game form, whether on its own or part of some ensemble like either Disney Infinity or even Kingdom Hearts?
That's been discussed, and I'd love it. Not up to me. I've tried to, when I knew people who were involved, tried to push it. There was a point where I thought we were getting close on Kingdom Hearts, and then the guys I knew who were working on it got fired. Or I'm sure they wouldn't like me calling it that. I'm sure they'd rather say that they left Disney under extreme circumstances. So I'd be very open to it, but obviously, it's I don't even work at Disney anymore. It's way beyond my.
Right to Disney. Demand that they come back.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing? I have a friend who actually wanted to create like not like a gargoyle show like you guys show, but a show that is centered on gargoyle characters. And I was wondering if you have any advice for him, and also if you think that's a good or bad idea.
Honestly, my advice is don't. And part of that, without a doubt, is personal bias. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but it doesn't help the marketplace to have competing similar ideas. We're out there. We're trying very hard to come back. If someone else comes up with Gargoyles exist, but if he's at all similar to what we're doing, then Disney, frankly, is going to sue him.
And I was going to say that you open yourself to copyright infringement and a huge lawsuit.
So Gargoyles exist as statues, so I can't claim copyright on the idea of a gargoyle statue. But if what he does with those are anything like what we did with it, then and it's not me, I don't own the property. Disney is going to get on fast, and I think we'd be much better served, your friend, in doing something that isn't competing with us, that isn't trying to do something similar with the property, and frankly isn't doing anything with Gargoyles at all. Find something else. When I was starting Gargoyles, there was Gremlins, and there were all sorts of poltergeists and Gremlins and all sorts of things. And if I had developed a show called Gremlins, everyone would have gone, "What are you doing? There's a movie out called Gremlins." It just doesn't make a lot of sense to take that route. He'd be better served, and I'd be better served to put my cards on the table if he went a different route.
Thank you.
Okay, you're last. We're way over time, so make it quick.
All right, this makes me real nervous. So we were talking, you guys were talking about Shakespeare and how the language is very Shakespearean. So my question is, for both of you, Mr. Wiseman, if you could put the Gargoyles into a Shakespeare play, which Shakespeare play would it be? And Mr. David, if you could be Goliath and in a Shakespeare play, or have Goliath play a role in a Shakespeare play, what would it be?
Okay, so I guess these are spoilers, but they're spoilers I gave away a long time ago, so I'm okay with giving away. But we had a premise for the second season that was called The Weird Macbeth. And the idea was that the Weird Sisters were still mad at Goliath for what happened on Avalon. And so they magically, in Central Park, put our cast into a production of Macbeth. And the problem that Goliath was facing is that he read the play and he knows how it ends. Actually, Goliath in the play was playing Macduff. Goliath was playing Macduff, and Elisa was playing Lady Macduff. And so his big concern was for Elisa, because if you know the play, Macduff actually survives at the end, but
His wife doesn't.
his wife does not. And Hudson would have been Duncan, and Macbeth would have been Macbeth. Demona would have been Lady Macbeth, and so it was this thing where they were all sort of suffering from this curse, where they had to go through the motions of doing this play for real. And so it was about how do we get out of it. We're going to use the actual language, and I wanted to do it as a two-parter. And that was the only premise that my bosses, and I don't even want to say reject, because my boss was like, I don't know about doing 2 episodes worth. He said, you can do it as a single episode. And I just felt that I'm the one who actually canned it, because I felt that we couldn't do justice to it in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought 40 minutes was pushing it, but 20 minutes, there just didn't seem any way we could do it.
I've got to run to the men's room, but I would say that I would love to explore the possibility of doing like Richard II as Goliath.
Thank you, everyone.